2024. This is episode 58 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and today I've got both Mike Koomar and Joe Meade with me. We'll go over some headlines in the sport, a couple of titles being clinched across the board, a couple of titles that are still yet to be clinched. We've got some bubble battles, and we've got some automatic bids that are set to be clinched tomorrow. So, guys, thank you for tuning in today. Mike, headlines first. Big Ten, mostly kind of by luck of the news coming out. We're going to start in Washington. Yesterday, the Washington Huskies knocked off their rivals on the road. Their rivals, Washington State, are going to the big dance. Washington knocks them off at their place, but news comes today that Mike Hopkins will be fired. Just one tournament in 8 years, Mike. Tough blow for the Huskies here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a surprising move to happen this year. Huskies have underperformed again this year, and in general have done so under Coach Hopkins. But just a weird timing. You're just coming off your biggest win of probably the last few years on the road at a really good Washington State team that had a chance to win the Pac-12 going into this game with a win. But I think the decision had to be made, and Washington at some point, they probably didn't want any chance of them running through the Pac-12 tournament and being like, all right, we got to keep them for another year. So they'll cut them off. Obviously, Coach Hopkins will finish out the year in the Pac-12 tournament. Washington probably not going to the NCAAs or NITs unless they get an auto bid from winning their conference. But everybody that I've heard from in the Washington program said that this guy's a great guy. It just didn't work out there. And Washington does not have a rich basketball history, but they're going to be hoping to take a step up when they go to the Big Ten next year.
And Joe, Big Ten, newcomers next year, the Washington Huskies among a couple of others. They're going to be bringing a new coach into both of their biggest programs when they go to the Big Ten next year. So what do you think Washington will look for as they make a pretty big change?
I think a lot of people in the Big Ten country wonder if this will affect, the Ohio State searchers, potentially a Michigan one, which we'll get into in a few minutes. I don't really think it will, though. I mean, they've shown in the past that they're their athletic leadership, even when you look at football, they really only look toward Arizona and Jed Fish. I believe all their candidates are going to be located on the West Coast or a West Coast kind of guy. Maybe you have someone who's in the SEC or whatnot that's a sleeper that has some West Coast ties, but I'd be shocked if this guy was anywhere east of Colorado, to be quite honest with you, Sean.
Yeah, it wasn't for lack of trying. The Huskies had a couple of big splashes in the transfer portal. They got Xavier Wheeler and Keon Brooks from Kentucky a couple of years ago. And they got Paul Mulcahy from Rutgers, which reports were saying it was a pretty lucrative NIL deal that they spent on him, but unfortunately no success following the Huskies up there. They will be a part of the Big Ten next year, as we've said multiple times when talking about both sports. Guys, we're going to stay in the Big Ten. We're going to go to my team, Bloomington, the Indiana Hoosiers. A crazy week all around. 3 main points we're going to talk about here. The first one being that about yesterday, Wednesday morning, early afternoon, the school announces that Mike Woodson will be retained for a 4th year next year. The board reportedly is very split at Indiana, and the pro-Woodson people won out. That later that night, they knock off Minnesota at the barn by 12. Was really more than that, and probably Indiana's best performance of the season. And then yesterday, 5-star commit, McDonald's All-American Liam McNeely decommits, allegedly because of the poor offensive system that Woodson is employing in Indiana. So, Joe, how could you sort through what's been a pretty messy week for the Hoosiers?
I seriously don't give, as you can tell if you listen to our In a Nutshell podcast, I'm not very lenient toward athletic directors. And I understand Indiana just made a major football hire, but come on. Indiana's one of the places where a football hire is not major. Basketball is that's what fills the seats. That's what the Hoosiers for. And I'm not that upset that they retained Woodson. I'm more upset at the fact that they kind of just try to sneak it in at this point of the season. They didn't they didn't want to face the music. Let's be honest, Sean. They didn't want this to be the lone headline in the state of Indiana after the season ends for the Hoosiers, which, barring a miracle, is not going to end in the NCAA tournament. So, Sean, I don't know. I think he's going to have to change a lot. Will be a broader discussion in the offseason. I don't think you, as a Hoosier fan, was shocked. I don't think most people were shocked. I think people were more hopeful than anything. But I'm more disappointed that this came out now, and and then losing McNeely is what really, really kind of put an exclamation point on it. That kind of reflects no confidence in the program whatsoever. Not to say they're dead to rights, but all indications now is that this won't get too much better unless something drastic changes.
Yeah, Mike, anything to add on what the future for the Candy Stripes looks like?
Yeah, I think first off, huge game by Kelly Ware against Minnesota, 26 points, 11 rebounds. One of his better games in a Hoosier uniform since transferring last year. But I think it's definitely a good call to keep Coach Woodson here at Indiana. He's had success in his previous years. I do agree with Joe, though. I'm a little surprised that Indiana didn't take time to evaluate their basketball program before making this determination and really not giving it much thought, it seemed. Maybe it's perhaps because they're waiting to find who would be a suitable replacement for Mike Woodson. And right now, there just doesn't seem like a lot of good coaching options for potential free agents in the game other than maybe a Dusty May from Florida Atlantic. And I don't think that would work for Indiana. So it is kind of an interesting time to make that decision. But with that being said, Indiana's got to play some seriously good basketball if they want to make the tournament. They probably got to make the Big Ten final, if not win it all.
Yeah, there's a couple of other things to sift through here because it's kind of a lot. For some reason, a lot of Bruce Pearl rumors were coming up about a possible link to Indiana, and I think Indiana coming out and saying that they're retaining Woodson was in response to that. And then there's these whole bunch of other rumors about what happens behind the scenes and how every player is going to transfer mass exodus style, and that has kind of coincided with them playing their best basketball of the year over the course of more than one game. They're on a 3-game winning streak, 2 road wins, and a win against Wisconsin at home. And, if you haven't heard the rumors yet, there's no way that Woodson's going to stay if those rumors are true. But rumors are often 100% true, are very rarely 100% true. So a lot of eyes are going to be on Indiana, probably for the wrong reason here. Woodson loses his only recruit in next year's class. Khalil Ware will be an NBA draft pick. So at the very minimum, they're going to have 5 scholarships open with the graduates and Ware. And, that Indiana's players are good enough to get pretty lucrative NIL deals somewhere else if this mass exodus does happen. And it's going to be a heavy reliance on the transfer portal, and that rarely works, as we've seen across the board in college hoops this year. Anything to add on the Hoosiers before we move on to one of our other programs on here? All right, Joe, we'll go over to you. Michigan announced, well, I don't know if they announced, but it leaked that Juwan Howard's going to be retained for next year. I think, that's definitely not surprising, but this year has been pretty poor. We were talking about it before. 8 wins on the year at this point of recording. Whoops. Siri just popped up. My bad. Juwan Howard, health issues, not getting players in to the academic side of school that he wanted, that were great players and would have changed the trajectory of this program. But what's up with Michigan?
Yeah, Sean, I think it's institutional failure. I think to blame it on Juwan is a complete joke. Now, to blame it solely on Juwan is a complete joke. Does he shoulder responsibility? Of course. I've been very adamant on this podcast. I think a lot of Michigan fans nationwide have felt this way. I think Warren Manuel is blatantly incompetent. At this stage of his tenure, and Mike, I can't wait for you to comment because you're not a Big Ten guy, you're a Big 12 guy, so I really want you to comment after I'm done here. To run an athletic program like Michigan, to have all 4 of your major head coaches leave, and what do I mean by that? I'll give you examples. John Beilein in 2019 left for the NBA. For the Cleveland Cavaliers. It wasn't the LA Lakers. It wasn't the Cavaliers with LeBron.
And he was fired within a year.
Like
Yes,
what,
fine.
15 games in?
Yeah, practically. Second, they lost their head hockey coach. It was some weird scandal. We don't need to get into that now. But Ward did make a decision on him, and as we can see now, Michigan hockey is affected in their recruiting. Number three, Michigan's baseball coach Eric Bakich took a Big Ten team to the Game 3 of the World Series. First team to do that since 1984. All he wanted, from my sources at Michigan, legitimately all the guy wanted was $200,000 to $300,000 more a year, which for the University of Michigan's athletic department is next to nothing. And wouldn't refuse to give him that. And better yet, all he wanted for his players was pretty good NIL deals. He wasn't begging for, Ohio State football levels of money. All he wanted was that. Nope, couldn't do it. And it ends up that all the stuff he wanted with the baseball program, not just NIL, but certain sponsorships, certain stuff on the wall, all came to be in the next administration. And finally, we have Jim Harbaugh. I don't think a lot would have stopped Jim Harbaugh going to the Chargers. I think that's a whole saga we can get into. But he didn't put out a contract offer until Harbaugh was offered the Chargers job, and Harbaugh all but accepted it. So, Sean, with all that said, were all four of those his fault? Probably not. Are you going to tell me he's responsible for none of them? I'm going to say no. And Juwan Howard, the man he hired, he doesn't back him up. He doesn't help him get guys in the portal. He doesn't help him do next to anything. All he does is say, I have confidence, blah, blah. Okay, Ward, are you going to help them get players in? And are you going to tell him, after a month after players are verbally committed, that they can't come to the school? Because all that did in 22 and 23 was prevent Juwan from going after other players. Now, we can get into Juwan's in-game coaching. It's not been great. The late collapse leads, where they practically led half their conference games and still lost all of them, is a joke. But you can't tell me this team last year with Terrence Shannon, who committed, wouldn't have made the Sweet at Michigan.
Wow.
I'm making Ward maybe the scapegoat because I do think there's other people to blame. I think, people in the academic administration are to blame. And I'll just leave it out here. I don't care how bad a student Caleb Love was. He went to the University of North Carolina, often renowned as a pretty good academic school. I really don't want to hear how he was too dumb to get into Michigan. Give me a break. That's where I'll end it. Mike, I'm dying to hear your thoughts.
Man, Joe, that's a lot. You guys did just win a national championship a couple months ago. But hey, I think, John Howard had some early success here with Michigan. He's 23-5, had that big season. During COVID, they went to the Elite Eight. I believe they won the regular season Big Ten that year. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
Really, since then, though, it's been pretty disappointing for Michigan. They did go to the Sweet 16 that following year, if I remember correctly, but not a great regular season. And last year, they got bounced in the first round of the NIT with star player Hunter Dickinson. And losing him, I don't know, Joe, if you think that is an institutional failure or if, Juwan could keep him or if there's another reason. But that was a pretty bad loss. And then this year, it's just been straight up embarrassing. You never expect a Michigan team. They probably won't get double-digit wins this year unless something crazy happens. This is probably one of the most embarrassing seasons in Michigan sports in recent memory. I'm thinking 2020 college football, I guess 2020 football season. That's pretty much, what I can think about Michigan. So, if not Harbaugh, if a guy here gets retained. He's got to be on a short leash. And I think part of the reason he will be retained is because of his legacy as a Fab Five. I think if he didn't have any Michigan royalty tied behind his name, he'd probably be gone. But since he's a member of the Fab Five, he's probably still exciting to a number of people in that fan base. He'll probably stay. And I think, Joe, you could probably attest to this. The Michigan people that I know, everybody wants Juwan Howard to succeed. They really, really do. Nobody wants him to be fired. So I think I can relate to that with Baylor's head coach in football. I think he should be fired. That's a separate issue. But Juwan Howard can't have that long of a leash going into this year, upcoming offseason.
Yeah, I don't. Let me just add in, Joe. I don't think many people are arguing that Juwan maybe should get an extra half a chance because of what he did for the basketball team and in the NBA for so many years. But those people are arguing that he's already gotten that with the whole Greg Gard situation, and
that's fair. Yeah.
And this seems like an extra chance and a half. Joe, it is not his fault that 2 potential All-Americans committed to his program and are not playing for them. And another guard that he's developed very well had a 6-game suspension because of academic reasons. So there's a world where McDaniel, Love, Shannon are the starting 3 guards for Michigan right now. And that team is probably a Sweet 16 team at the very minimum. But I still think like this falling completely off the cliff. Joe, we had a clip at the beginning of the year. Michigan's too talented to finish 9th. Well, they're going to finish 14th.
Yep.
And I think you could argue that they still are too talented to finish 9th. But
yeah,
missing the tournament and going off the rails are 2 different things, and unfortunately Michigan has the latter.
Yeah, and Sean, I'll just bring this home. I think last year around this time we lost to Indiana on that last Sunday of the regular season. I think that and the Illinois game 3 days earlier, where Juwan Howard's Battle of Waterloo or Battle of whatever, if you want to make a history analogy, I think that's where it completely went off the rails. Had Michigan won that game and made the tournament, people would be mad at Juwan. People wouldn't be on his case the way they are this year. I'll put it this way: if you have 2 lottery picks and an All-American, I think everyone would agree John Beilein with that team would do serious damage, not only in March, but in the regular season. So I think to hold him to the Beilein standard is unfair, but to hold him to, a standard of let's just
standard
tournament every year, yeah, I think that's a complete joke. And I think the fact that other people aren't going to be held responsible is also a travesty. And Mike, I'll make this point to you. For Michigan winning the national title, the current administration had 0 to do with it. Sure, they fended off the NCAA, but I mean, I'm not going to give credit to administration for not laying down in the middle of the street and getting run over. I think that's the bare minimum I'd expect of any school's administration. And current administration did not hire Jim Harbaugh, and they certainly didn't keep Jim Harbaugh. So, yeah, but that's the end of my rant. I bet my season tickets and my field pass will forever be revoked for that, but the truth had to be said.
Man, well, who knows? This might be Juwan Howard's biggest charge if things don't turn around here.
And Joe, we talked about this last time or one of the times before. Juwan Howard has had 1 season at Michigan where he wasn't on the bubble, or worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they've turned 2 of those okay years into Sweet 16s, which you got to give him credit for, but 1 game goes different in the regular season, and you might be playing in the NIT versus Sweet 16. That seems like a pretty big difference, hinging on a moment that really could have gone either way.
Absolutely.
We're going to go to the SEC real quick, Mike. We had Tennessee getting their revenge on South Carolina. The Volunteers win on the road after losing to the Gamecocks at home early in the year. They clinched the outright SEC title. They're going to be a 1 seed at this point, and they have a really tough game on the weekend that we're going to get to later. But, Mike, how about this from Tennessee winning the league, which is a pretty good SEC?
Yeah, and how impressive was this win? I mean, it ended up only being a 7-point win, but Tennessee dominated this game. And really, really a great performance. And yeah, Sean, I agree. I don't really think they're playing for much going the rest of the way. I think they've kind of taken care of clinching that number 1 seed, the final number 1 seed, I might add. So congrats to the Volunteers. The big question is going to be, though, really since Rick Barnes has been at Texas, which now is quite a long time ago, will he be able to win the big games in the big dance? And he's underperformed his entire career at Tennessee. He did it also at UT after his Final Four year. With Kevin Durant, they didn't even make it to the Sweet 16. So, try that on for size. But we'll see if this UT team can get the job done. This was another incredibly impressive game by Dalton Connect. He had 26 points, and a player that is really going to be in the running. Probably not going to win Player of the Year, but probably going to be runner-up for it. And also, Rick Barnes is probably best player since Kevin Durant.
Yeah, Joe, the SEC has been very impressive from the outside. What are your thoughts on it, and how many dangerous teams do you think they have?
I'll just make one comment on Tennessee. I think Dalton Connect might be the piece they're missing. I was not going to get funny there, I promise. Is that the difference for Rick Barnes in the tournament this year? I'm sure we'll get into that in our preview show. But in terms of the SEC, Sean, there's a lot of teams that scare me. And this is coming from an outside fan. Kentucky is young, but they're a team, and I frankly I don't disagree with this
Red
take.
flag.
Yeah, they're a team that I could see lose in the first round or go to the Final Four. That's how a lot of
Yeah.
people view them. I think they're impossible to get a pulse on. You can't deny their talent, but I could deny some of their probably temperament. I don't know if that's the right word. Maybe their demeanor. But either way, Sean, the SEC's really good. Alabama's really good. I think Florida's good, and even like teams that aren't going to get it, like Ole Miss. I think if you put Ole Miss against 5 through 12 of the Big Ten, I think they'd beat every one of those teams more than in 10 times. They'd probably beat them more than half, like as in 6-10 versus maybe Iowa, even 6-10 versus Michigan State for all I've seen. So, really impressed with the SEC. I think it'll only get better.
Yeah, the SEC, we thought it would be good, but the teams that are good, we didn't expect to be good. We had Arkansas first, we had Texas A&M second. Neither of those teams are going to go to the big dance. That tournament will be fun to watch. We're hoping to get an episode out for each major conference preview. We'll see what happens there, but the SEC is definitely going to be on the top of our list. We're going to go to the Big East now. UConn had already clinched the title early last week, but they beat a Tyler Kolek-less Marquette Golden Eagles team. The Golden Eagles hang. This is a home game. They had the juice, but ultimately they come up short. How worried are you, Joe, about Marquette if Tyler Kolek cannot come back?
I don't know if worried's the right word. I think the big thing with Shaka, and it's funny, we're talking about another ex-Texas head coach. Since he's been to the Final Four,
Nothing.
I can't think of anything in March he's done. And, I'm not trying to relate this to Michigan, but whenever Michigan looked at Shaka, and particularly in 2019, my biggest criticism was I think he's a heck of a coach. The record's great. The development's great. The tournament success has not been there since 2011. So I think success for Marquette this year, and I know that they've been a top 8 team most of the year. I think just getting to the Sweet 16 would be success. So without Tyler Kolek, I think they could certainly do that. I think if you want to broaden your expectations, though, they're going to need him. So that's my take on the situation. I'm not too worried about them getting to the Sweet 16 on paper, but it's one of those things with Rick Barnes and Purdue, frankly. I can't pick them to go that far. I need to see it.
Hey, Mike, they did lose at Creighton by 14. They hung for most of that game before kind of running out of gas late. And they kept this one close for the entire game, too. Kolek was pretty injured last year when they lost to Michigan State in the round of 32. Do you think that Tyler Kolek, well, I'll ask you 2 questions here. Does Tyler Kolek have to play in the Big East tournament for the committee to give them the benefit of the doubt? And could they be upset early if he is forced to be on the sidelines?
So I don't think he necessarily needs to play in the Big East tournament. I do think either way right now, Marquette's kind of going towards the 3 line. And the Big East tournament could certainly determine that, but I don't think the committee is going to take that into account when they're seeding Marquette. However, I think if they going to do anything in the tournament, they absolutely need him to be in the roster. And going back looking at Shaka Smart, Shaka has won 1 game in the NCAA tournament since he took VCU to the Final Four. And that was last year with Marquette. And look, I understand it. 1 year, VCU, I think his last year coaching VCU, they lost on a 4-point play to Stephen F. Austin. 1 year, they lost on a half-court buzzer beater against Northern Iowa when he was with UT. Like, I get it. A couple of freak games. But with that being said, he just hasn't gotten the job done. And who knows, this is just his second year at Marquette. And Shaka's done a hell of a job at Marquette, getting them back to being a powerhouse here in college basketball. But they're kind of trending in the wrong direction. 6 losses is also a lot of losses in a Big East that is not super deep this year. So I think there's certainly a lot of questions for this team when they've played really 2 tournament teams in the last, 2.5, 3 weeks. And they lost both of them. And UConn, they kind of hung with them. They were losing that entire game. Like that game was never really super close. So definitely a little bit of a red flag when I'm looking at seeding Marquette for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, they hung around, which was good for their numbers. It just seemed like the inevitable UConn kill shot was coming. and it never really did.
Yeah.
But I don't like UConn was never really in doubt of losing the game. But Shaka's at least keeping. I mean, they could have easily gotten blown out in these two games because you can argue that even with Tyler Kolek, Creighton's a better team than them, and even with them, UConn is definitely a better team than them. But we're gonna have to see. They are keeping information about the injury pretty close to the chest so that the committee doesn't punish them like we've seen over the years. Like I remember Iowa State, Georges Niang, his injury, they were punished to seed line for that. And they're keeping it close to the chest. I don't think the prognosis is very good. I would highly doubt that he plays in the Big East. Maybe they should just show that he wasn't on the bench for either one of these games. Maybe they show that he's in gym clothes on the bench. Maybe shows that he's there. Or maybe I don't know. But not even sure what the injury really is. The only real word that it is that it is very odd for a basketball player to get this injury, and we don't even know if it's to his leg, to his arm, to his head. I mean, it could be any of those. So just gonna have to wait and see with the Golden Eagles. Mike, we're gonna turn it over to your conference now, Big 12 land. We've got a title that has yet to be clinched outright. Iowa State holds off BYU. The Cougars nearly complete their second huge road win upset in as many games, but Hilton Magic gets the Cyclones across the line. Iowa State is just one game back with a game at Kansas State on Saturday, and Houston, the team that's one game ahead of them, is hosting Kansas, a team that already beat them, so it's not totally out of the question for Iowa State to get a share.
Yeah, I really thought that BYU had a chance to get the upset in this one. I picked them to win, and they had the lead with 4 minutes to go in this game. They just did not score the basketball in the last 4 minutes, and that's what cost them in this one. They all had a big first half lead as well over the Cyclones, but it's just tough to close a game at Hilton Coliseum. Iowa State's going to finish the year undefeated. Houston also struggled during the week. They came close to being upset against UCF. That was a significantly tighter game. But that being said, I think Iowa State still has a really good chance to get a share of the Big 12 title, their first one in a long time. They're going to have a game against Kansas State that is going to be significantly tougher than people are giving Kansas State credit for. I do think Kansas State, despite the loss at Allen Fieldhouse, is trending in the right direction with a young Coach Tang team. So I certainly think they're going to give Iowa State a run for their money. But I also think Kansas could give Houston a run for their money. I still think the Cougars are going to win that game and clinch the overall title for the regular season. But Iowa State certainly, Sean, we thought that they were going to be a good team. This was Otzelberger's best recruiting class going into the season that he had at Iowa State. But I don't know if anybody expected them to be knocking on the door as a 2 seed.
Yeah, the way the bracketology is working out for the Big 12, there probably is only room for one of the teams to be a 2 seed. You've got Houston as the 1, and the South region between Baylor, Iowa State, and maybe Kansas if they can beat Houston. Unlikely, but there's not really a lot of chance that 2 of those teams are 2 seeds with the SEC so stacked, and Duke and Carolina only playing each other and not really going to move the needle anywhere else. But they're just going to have to look out for that now. Iowa State's non-conference strength of schedule in the 340s, so if they do get nicked to the 3, that's going to be why. Joe, we're going to go to you for the Big East, a big bubble battle in New Jersey that I was in attendance for. Neither of these teams really want to show that they deserve to be in the tournament, but it's Seton Hall that gets the victory here, 66-56. Villanova's coming dangerously close to that threshold of 3 games over 500, which is the precedent since Michigan got in a couple years ago. But Joe, thoughts on the Pirates here in this one, and have either of these teams done enough to hear their name?
Villanova's has to be exactly what you said, Sean. I don't think they want to play the tournament. I thought they pretty much, I wouldn't say dominate Providence. They thoroughly beat them, though. I don't think anyone who watched that game. Yeah, I don't think anyone who watched that game could even tell us at the Dunk, and I think the crowd was engaged. It's just if you muted the TV, you'd be like, oh, this is a home game for Villanova, the way they clinically destroyed them at certain points of that game. And then to follow it up with a clunker against Seton Hall. I don't think Seton Hall played all that well, Sean. Why's the point guard's name escape me? Their best player only had 5.
More?
Yeah. Only had 5. No. Seton Hall's best player.
Richmond.
Dawes.
Goodard.
Well, Dawes is the point guard,
Dawes,
but
yeah.
Richmond's the best player.
Dawes didn't even have to get going, and Seton Hall beat them pretty easily. That's a problem for me, Sean. I think at this stage, Villanova's best bet, it's not to win the Big East tournament. That's completely melodramatic. They got to show some sign of life pretty soon.
Yeah,
because they're running out of days.
The way that it's going to set up, Joe, is Seton Hall's probably good for now. They host DePaul tomorrow. You'd think they'd win that pretty easily. And then they're the 4 seed in the Big East tournament. So they're going to play a team that cannot... They're going to play most likely St. John's, I think, a team that they already beat twice. So if you happen to lose that game, well, you still beat St. John's 2 out of 3 times. And St. John's is in the field, too. So I don't think the Red Storm could jump Seton Hall if you've won one of the 3 games. But Seton Hall's probably good, barring a loss to DePaul. They always get after it defensively, but we've made the comment before, Mike, that when their shots don't go for the Pirates, they feel it on the other end, and that's why they've gotten blown out quite a few times this year. But when they get after it, they're fun to watch. But, man, is that offense pretty ugly. It's about players getting buckets themselves. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. Villanova has the big wins. They have the number of losses.
Yeah.
I don't think the committee wants to see them at 3 games over 500, because then they're going to be compared to the Michigan team a couple years ago that was 18-15, I think, Joe, right?
17
and 14. And it's really unfair.
18-15, my bad, Sean, sorry. Yep.
Maybe that was before the Big Ten tournament, and they went 1-1. But it's really not fair to compare teams across years because the bubble is different, and that was pre-COVID, or was it the first COVID year?
Post-COVID by a year, but still completely different league, different field that year.
So that's inevitably going to happen. That's not fair. They've lost 3 quad 3 games. They've 6 high-profile wins. I mean, committee's going to want them to sort themselves out here. They're going to play Creighton at home on Saturday. It is at Wells Fargo, which for those who don't know is the Philadelphia 76ers home. Nova plays a couple of home games there. They are not the same as when they play on their on-campus arena. That's much more tightly packed, much louder, rather than filling up a big 15,000-seater. But they've already beat Creighton. They beat them on the road. So obviously if they were to win this, they could afford to lose that first game in the Big East tournament and be the 3 games over 500 that we talk about. But if they lose it, they are likely to play one of the teams at the bottom of the league, DePaul and Georgetown in the first round. And will that win do much for them? And then if you lose the next game, there you go, you're back under the 3 games. So Villanova might run themselves into a hole here. I don't think we're really going to be wondering about them. If they lose this game to Creighton and don't pick up a win against another tournament quality team at the Garden, I don't think they're going to be in the field. It's going to be hard for them to be left out, especially with the type of players that they have. But at this point, anything to add on Nova other than they've got it in their hands. They've got Creighton at home.
They got to win on Saturday. That's it.
Saturday's a must-win.
Yeah, we will. That'll be the first game that we're going to pick in a little bit, so we can preview that game a little bit more later. But we've got 4 automatic bids that are going to be clinched in the next 48 hours. We've got 8 o'clock tomorrow on Saturday. It's the Ohio Valley Championship game from the Ford Center in Evansville, Indiana. We've got no opponents yet for those. The semifinals are ongoing tonight, but OVC typically is the first bid clinched, and we could see anybody from Morehead State, Arkansas, Little Rock, I believe that's the right league, and somewhere around there. We've got the Big South on Sunday at noon on ESPN2. No opponents for that either. We've got Arch Madness coming to a close at 2 o'clock on Sunday at CBS. Could see Indiana State, could see Drake in that. We just had the quarterfinals today, so still a bunch of teams left, but are you guys looking forward to a potential Drake-Indiana State round 3?
I mean, I think that you can't count out Bradley right now. Bradley's playing really good basketball, and I think that's a team that could certainly upset Drake and pour down on their chance to get to the NCAA tournament. So definitely a dark horse in the Arch Madness bracket, but keep your eye on the Bradley Braves.
Hey, Bradley does play Illinois-Chicago tonight. We've got Indiana State already into the semis. We've got Northern Iowa into the semis. We've got Drake beating Evansville by 10. Assume that they get through. And then Bradley potentially that fourth spot. Bradley does win. They are 12.5-point favorites. If Bradley does win, that'll be the 4 best teams in the league. And, there's a reason why this game is on CBS. It's because this typically is one of the more competitive conference tournaments. It usually means it's usually a one-bid league. We've seen Belmont get in as an at-large before. There's a potential for maybe a Drake or Indiana State at-large if they do lose to each other in the championship game. But this game being on CBS is, I think, my start to March Madness with Arch Madness.
Yeah.
A couple of the other bids will be clinched already, but there's a reason that the CBS is going to send their crew out there, and there's a reason why that game is on CBS.
And Sean, I would say this conference just got a whole lot better, too, when they added Belmont this past year. Belmont came from the Ohio Valley. It was typically a Belmont versus Murray State battle in the finals every year there. But really exciting to see them join this league and make Arch Madness even that much more competitive. It's pretty cool.
The game at the same time on ESPN2 on Sunday will be for the Atlantic Sun. Crazy conference tournament if you haven't seen that so far.
Yeah.
The 1, the 3, and the 4 seed all went down in their first game. It's the 2 seeds, 1, 3, and 5. Stetson, the 2 seed, gets through. They're hosting this game against 4 seed Austin P. Some crazy buzzer beaters in this one, Joe, if you haven't seen it. But
be impossible not to. It's all over Instagram.
It is, especially our Instagram. Getting collabs for a lot of the highlights. So that'll be an interesting game. Stetson probably near the 15 or 16 seed line if they do get in. But that's all the headlines we've got for today. Just under 40 minutes. Should be perfect timing. Now we're going to go to the picks. We are going to go in the snake order. I don't know how it's set up on you guys, but the order will be Joe, me, Mike,
Perfect.
Me, Joe, and so on. First game is that Villanova and Creighton game that we said. Wells Fargo Center, 2:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox tomorrow. Joe, who's going to win this ball game?
Give me Nova. I think a team playing for their lives at this stage, they know what's on the line. They don't want their lives to be... And frankly, even winning, like you just gave the dialogue before, Sean, not winning big in the Big East tournament, for example, only winning 1 or 2 games against some not-so-great opponents probably won't do the trick. So this will do the trick, though. And this makes their trip to the Garden a lot less tense. So give me Villanova. I think they're going to feel this is their early round of 64 game.
Yeah, I'm going the opposite way, Joe. I'm going Creighton. Villanova rarely got the ball inside against the Seton Hall defense. Creighton doesn't foul, and they have a shot blocker in Kalkbrenner. So I think Villanova is going to adjust from not getting it inside against Seton Hall. They're going to try and go inside against Creighton. It's not going to work. Give me the Jays. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, Villanova's not going to be able to play well just going on inside on Kalkbrenner and Creighton. But Creighton's been playing really good basketball lately. Aside from that loss to St. John's that followed up that UConn win, they've been really solid. I think they've won 4 out of 5 against quality opponents. So Coach Greg McDermott also got contract extension today. It was announced. So,
Amid Ohio State links. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. But congrats to Creighton for retaining their guy, and I think the Jays are going to get the job done today or tomorrow.
We've got 4 o'clock on ESPN tomorrow, Mike. We've got number 14 Kansas going on the road to spoil the party at number 1 Houston. Any chance for the Jayhawks to pull this one off?
You know, I did say that Kansas is going to have a chance. I just don't think it's much of one. I think Houston's going to win this game by double digits. Look, Kansas is just not as athletic as this Houston team. They're not very deep, and they continue to underperform this year. So give me Houston by double digits.
Yeah, I agree. McCullough is back for Kansas, so Maybe they keep it close, but they got punked at the Fog, and outright titles on the line. Going with Houston. Joe?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Houston. I think it's pretty close to the first half. I think gradually though, Houston's gonna wear them down like they've done so many times in the past this year. I think Kansas and Houston too, to be fair, are probably gassed at this point in the season, but definitely think Houston probably wins by anywhere 12 to 15. But I wouldn't say it'd be like anything embarrassing either.
Same time, Joe, 4 o'clock on CBS. We've got Big Blue Nation, Reed Shepherd, and Rob Dillingham going on the road to Rocky Top to face the SEC outright champions in Tennessee. Is there going to be a hangover or not? Or are the Orange going to get the job done?
I think the Orange get the job done. I think Knoxville comes alive. I think it's probably a coronation in a way for Tennessee's regular season. Clearly, that doesn't mean much for the next weeks to come, but I think they top it off the right way. Give me Tennessee. I think it'll be a back and forth game. Tennessee probably wins 5-7. It's close, but Kentucky doesn't really get to have the kill shot in mind.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Kentucky. They're super fun to watch. I do think Tennessee. The letdown spot after the championship, it's real. These are college kids. We're all out of college now, so they're younger than us. I'm going with Kentucky 110, Tennessee 103.
Yeah, I think it really just depends which Kentucky team shows up. Either way, Tennessee is going to score over 100 points in this one. Kentucky just has no defense. It's pretty insufferable to watch. But I agree with Joe. I think Tennessee is going to get the job done. It's still senior day. It still means a lot to these Tennessee guys. They're going to be playing their last game in Rocky Top. So give me the Vols by double digits as well.
Mike, this was kind of unintentional, but I'm happy the way it's lined up. Baylor goes on the road to Texas Tech, 6 o'clock on ESPN2. The Red Raiders kind of teetering around that 6-7 seed. They don't want to get dragged into the 8-9. Baylor going on the road with that 2 seed in mind. Who you got?
Give me the Bears by $1 billion.
Yeah.
Man, it gives me a lot of joy to pick against Texas Tech. I think Baylor, this is going to be one of their toughest games coming down the stretch. Lubbock is a raucous crowd, especially when they're playing the Bears. It means a lot more to Tech than it does to us. With that being said, Baylor's coming alive. I think they're playing their best basketball lately, and they had a nice, resilient win against Texas on Monday. So give me a rested Baylor Bears to go and get the road dub.
Yeah, I agree too, Mike. This is an unofficial stat, but I don't think you've ever picked against your team in the history of this podcast.
That's not true. I have. I picked against Baylor twice this year.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember maybe at the Fog?
At Kansas was one. I think Michigan State was the other, actually.
Interesting. And they lost both of them. So when Mike picks Baylor, they're undefeated, question mark. I'm going with Baylor too. I think they're clicking. They have a rest, as Mike said, which is huge at this time of year. Texas Tech, I mean, they don't really need this game. They're going to the tournament either way. It does mean more to them, as Mike said, but I'm going Baylor on the road. Pick up a big win. Joe, who you got?
I'm going to go Baylor, but I'm just going to make a general comment. I don't think we're going to see these two teams anywhere near their best. I think this is considering the Big 12 titles out of hand, and I know NCAA seeding's always on the table, but whoever loses this game, I think it's a lot more consequential for Texas Tech since they'll go to that 8-9 line, or they'll be right on it at the very least. And if Baylor loses, who cares? I mean, what? They're going to be potentially a high 3? I don't think so. So, yeah, I'm going to go Baylor based off nothing that I think these teams are going to come motivated, but not that motivated, unlike these other games we're going to see.
Joe, we're going to turn it around to you for the game day game. UNC on the road at Duke. The Tar Heels punked the Blue Devils in game 1. They only ended up winning by 9. It wasn't that close. Duke has a chance to cut down the nets on their home floor against their rivals. Who you got?
With that said, Sean, you set it up perfectly. Give me the Blue Devils. I think they were humiliated in the first matchup. I do not think they let that happen again. And UNC's kind of been in their head. And people are going to roll their eyes at me. Ever since Coach K's last game and the Final Four game, and I know Duke fans are reaching through the screen to strangle me or the podcast, I think they need to exercise some demons, and I think tomorrow's the night.
Get them, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, Duke is pretty healthy. They've been playing a lot better since that game, but I think they're soft still. Going with UNC. These other than Elliot Cadeau, these Carolina Tar Heels have seen a lot of college basketball. Cormac Ryan, R.J. Davis, Armando Bacot. I think they get the job done here. I think they're a better team than Duke. And like Joe said, I still think that there's some demons in the air for what the Tar Heels did with their season on the line at Cameron Indoor 2 years ago. Mike, split the tie.
It pains me to say this, but I'm going to go with the Tar Heels in this one. They've been playing better basketball. They had a couple of tough games. They barely got that win against the U a couple of weeks ago, but they've been playing better. And I think what they're going to lean on is that experience that they have, specifically their experience in this game. I think Davis and Bacot have probably played a combined 18 or 17 Duke versus North Carolina basketball games. So they've got a lot of experience in this game. And they know what it's like to play Cameron Indoor. So, yeah, give me the Tar Heels to get the win here. I think Duke, controversial statement. I think Duke's kind of soft. So I think the physicality for UNC is going to catch up, and they're going to get the win.
Mike, to you for the Fox primetime game. UConn on the road at Providence. The Friars out of the field at this point. They absolutely need this game. There's not a better team to beat in the country in terms of a resume builder. Do you give Devin Carter and the Friars any chance to pull off the upset?
No, not really. I think UConn they're just so much better of a team. And playing in Providence, that's one of the toughest places to play in the Big East. It might actually be the toughest, except for this year. And Kim English is a young coach. They'll get their crack at UConn later, but this is not going to be the game for them.
Yeah, it's not too far from Hartford, so
No.
UConn fans will get there in numbers. I'm gonna, this is the fourth straight road team that I'm picking, which is not fun. I'm not happy about that, but I'm picking the Huskies too. They just seem like a well-oiled machine. They have not lost since that game to Creighton, and their losses are few and far between. Desperate spot though for the Friars. Weird things happen in desperate spots. Joe, giving the Friars any chance?
I'm going to give them a chance, but here's their only chance. They can't get blown out of the gate early. They can't go in lapses like they did against Villanova. That's a recipe not only for failure, it's a recipe to get massacred at home on senior night. And that's the last thing Providence fans want to have in their first year under Kim English. And especially, I think it's still been an emotional year for Friar Nation. I'm not saying that they're devastated they lost Ed Cooley. I think it's quite the opposite. But I think it's still a feeling that, maybe they were slighted in a way by him. I think they really want to keep this game close because if they get down by more than 7 at any point, especially early on, this game could get ugly. With that said, Sean, I think Providence keeps it pretty close, but I think UConn's just the better team. Give me the Huskies.
Yeah, if you think Providence, their best three players, Aduro, Carter, Gaines, can probably go toe-to-toe with UConn's best three. But those three are going to have to play the whole game for Providence. And Klingon and Newton and Spencer, they're going to get a lot of rest for UConn. So I think it's probably tied at halftime, pretty close. And I think UConn does put them away in the second half like they kind of didn't do to Marquette. But Providence, they need it badly. And, sometimes teams play inspired when they need it badly. But that's all the games we're going to pick for today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to episode of 58 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. We're going to try and get some clips out, and we'll see you next time.